Welcome to the Adventures in the Sky podcast, sharing inspiring stories to empower you to be dreamers and doers. For the sky's the limit. Proudly presented by Flying Fillies, an uplifting historical adventure book inspired by the women Air Force service pilots, WASP of World War II. As America's female aviation pioneers, the WASP are the original power girls. Hi, I'm Christy Hui, author of Flying Fillies. In every episode, you'll hear stories from the WASP, kin of WASP, women aviator pioneers sharing their secrets to success. Their trials and tribulations pave their inner journey to becoming trailblazers. Welcome to our podcast, everyone. I have the pleasure of speaking with Lisa Taylor, Executive Director of the National WASP World War II Museum. Lisa, would you do me the honor of introducing yourself to our audience?
Well, hi, Christy. As you said, I'm Lisa Taylor with the WASP World War II Museum. I've been the executive director here almost 5 years that I've been in this role. And it's been a wonderful time getting to know more WASP families and being part of preserving their history and promoting their legacy and protecting the airfield on which they served.
That's wonderful. Now, I also realized that perhaps lately you have expanded on your mission statement. Do you care to talk about that?
Yes, the expansion was really promoting the legacy. The museum's been here for 20 years, and the WASP, are the foundation, and they always will be. And when you come visit the museum, it really is, 3/4 about them. But the expansion has come into legacy pilots, right? Because we know that the WASP broke that glass ceiling. They paved the way for other women to come and fly in the military. And so we're connecting the dots to our modern pilots. And we feel like that's really important, because the WASP were real mentors to that next generation of women that flew. They actually started an organization called Women Military Aviators. And they reached out to that second generation and said, come be part of this group and let us mentor you. We can help you because we've been through the same thing. And so it made sense that we would just connect those dots to generations of today so that we have tangible women that our audiences can relate with.
Well, that's a wonderful mission because I met you at the homecoming event, the fly-in event in April. And what a fine job you and your team did, and a great testimony of your mission. Tell me, how much effort does it take to organize an event like that?
Months. It really does, because it's several events wrapped up into one. So we have an event that really honors the families of the WASP, because as of 2021, we have no more WASP coming. This was started, for them. They used to come back to Avenger Field. That's why we called it homecoming. And, back in our heyday, we would have 30 WASP here. But, they're all over 100 now, so they stay home. But their families come. So, we have all these sub-events where we honor their families. And, of course, the museum is open for tours, and we bring in airplanes. And we have planes flying. We have symposiums that, you got to be a speaker for us last year, which was so great. You were there among some other authors. And then we have a fundraising gala that, helps us continue our expansion and our mission. So it's months of work.
Yeah, I felt the energy there too. And just being with the kins of the WASP, you feel their legacy and their spirits in that hangar. And it's just so, I have to say that was my first time being at a homecoming event. It really touched me. And it's a very moving experience. So you and your team are to be commended for preserving that history It's a marvelous job you did.
Thank you.
I just hope that a lot of people would be coming in the years to come.
I hope so too. It is a great time to learn about them and learn about what they did. And then, you also get to meet those younger pilots who are so excited about the WASP. And, they don't take that limelight on themselves. They just shine it back to the WASP. And so it's just a great, you know, it's emotional, but then it's also educational and fun. So yeah, I hope it would come.
Why is it important to preserve the WASP legacy or history in general?
It's just so important to understand where we came from because, when we look back and see what the people before us have done, it informs our decisions about the future. It gives us courage, maybe that we can move on and do things that we previously didn't think that we could do. And, obviously it can serve as a cautionary tale, but it's important to not lose sight of who we are.
Well said. In your opinion, what are the biggest challenges you face as a executive director of the museum?
I think it is getting people to stop and take a look at who the WASP were. I think, we have some great opportunities, to reach this youngest generation, but we just have to pivot. In the past, we've had a lot of World War II veterans that came and visited, and they loved it because they had that connection. And so for us, it's presenting it in a way that's meaningful to our younger generations, because every generation has their own style of learning and expressing themselves. And we just have to meet them where they're at, right? It's our responsibility to put it in a language that they understand and show them how meaningful it could be. So I think it's driving that engagement to the next generation.
Mm-hmm. So what have you offered in terms of educational tools, interactive features that the new generation is more responsive to?
We do a lot more hands-on, less talking, more showing. That's really,
Right.
what we have to do. And so, for instance, we were at an air show in Houston a couple of weeks ago. And, in the past, we would have had our airplane flying in the show and we would have had an educational booth. But this time we chose not to fly and we had the plane static, which seems so counterintuitive. But what we did is we wrapped the educational exhibit around that plane. And then we had about 400 people get up on the wing of the airplane and look in this World War II 80-year-old aircraft. And, all of a sudden, they're much more interested in the WASP and where this plane came from and what it did because they're standing there and they're looking inside of a cockpit that is completely foreign to their modern way of thinking. And then you grab their attention, then you have it. So it's getting a lot more like that. Or when we have school kids come through the museum, we tell them about the WASP, but we tell them through holograms and video. And then we pull out activity stations and they get to rivet, they get to wire tie, practice some navigation and make sentences in Morse code. So we want that engagement.
Mm-hmm. Evoking their curiosity.
Yes, right.
And planes, right? Planes. Who doesn't like planes? Kids love planes, right?
Yeah, they do for the most part. What's fun for us now is we have 4 airplanes in this hangar and they represent every level of training. And so that's been a lot of fun too, for them to, when we tell them, oh, they had to start in one plane and graduate to the next plane, again, they're touching, they're feeling, they're looking. It's not just academic.
Now, you recently acquired a new plane.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us the story.
It's a great story. It's the AT-6, which that was the advanced trainer for the men and women. If you were training in World War II, you wouldn't have graduated without proving you could fly that airplane. And it was the favorite among the men and women because it has so much horsepower, right? So, think about it. Before they came into the WASP, I mean, the ladies were flying just these little lightweight airplanes for fun. So even a basic trainer was a lot more than they were used to handling. By the time they got to the AT-6, it was 600, horsepower, zippy, very maneuverable. So the women loved it. So the way, we weren't honestly, even fundraising for a plane 2 years ago. I was working on new exhibits, making more interactive exhibits like I've been talking about, less wordy, more show and tell. And the son of a wasp called me and said, "Hey, I have a significant amount of money I'd like to give you, but only for a T6. And I don't care how long it takes you to get one, but I'm going to give you this money and you got to hang on to it until you can apply it toward a plane." And I said, "Oh man, this is great." And I, of course, thanked him. And I just threw it out on social media. "Hey, we have this money. We need this much more." And in 18 months' time, we were buying an airplane. People just rose to the occasion because they knew what an important airplane that was to the men and women who flew in World War II. And this museum needed one. What better museum to have that, that represents the women of World War II?
That's just an incredible story.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
On so many levels.
I know.
Right?
Yeah.
You got social media helping you,
Mm-hmm.
and the son of a wasp stepping up. Now, that 86 also represents the last plane in the lineup for your museum, right?
The last,
It completes your airplane collection.
it does. It does. There's one more basic trainer that we could get because they used one basic trainer in 1943 and one in 1944. We just have one of them, but then we have the basic and then both of the advanced planes, and so we feel pretty complete at this point. Happy, and the hangar is full.
Right. In order to get more plane, you have to get more hangars.
I would. Yes, I would have to fundraise for another entire hangar.
Yeah, with your ability to do an event like that, I was there in person. I would have no doubt that you would do that. Now you have the PT-17, right? And the PT-19.
We actually have the PT-19 in the building, the Stearman, not the 17. That's the one that we don't have here.
I see.
Right. And then we have the BT-13, the basic
13,
the Volti. Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then we have, of course, the AT-6 and then the UC-78.
UC-78. Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. And now, are the planes, the WASPs, favorite too when they come to the museum or when they came to the museum?
Yes. And I wish we'd had more planes when they came. As we've gotten bigger in our ability to buy airplanes and get people here to bring their airplanes, as that has grown, of course, the number of WASP have shrunk. And I only wish that more could have been with us to see this day. We're down to a point now where we have about 10 WASP left. And so this is turning into an in memory of kind of museum, which just makes me sad. It's not what I want, but they adored those airplanes. They didn't care about anything else but the airplanes.
Yeah, it must have been sad to have the WASP not being able to come to an event like that.
Yeah, it is. And that's all our veterans, of course. It's not just the women, but it's been a long time since that war, so it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. What's the one story about the WASP that you've encountered and has stuck with you and inspired you?
I think for me, it has been the fact that they were all pilots when they entered their service. The men they didn't have to be pilots, but the women did. And, before I learned about the WASP, I didn't even know women were flying that early. I had no idea that they started flying just 9 years after the Wright brothers made their debut flight. And I always laugh, that women might be behind the curve. You can slow a woman down, but you can't hold her down, right? She's going to go learn what she wants to learn. And I was just amazed that they learned how to fly. They took the time and the money and the risk, right? And they wanted so much to fly professionally, but they didn't know if that opportunity would even be there for them. They just did it and hoped. And when the opportunity opened up, they were ready. They had everything they needed to walk through that door. And it's just my favorite thing to tell kids because it's impacted me. I think about my own personality, and I tend to like the safe side of the street. I don't like to waste time. I hate to waste money. And it's limited what I've been willing to do. And I wonder how different my life might have been if I'd taken bigger risks. And I just like that they did that. And then look what they got to do. It didn't necessarily end well for them because, of course, the program was disbanded. They weren't allowed to fly professionally after the war, but yet they have their place in history, and what they did mattered. Even if it didn't work out great for them, it mattered. And it built a bridge for those women coming behind them. And I think we should all be bridge builders in one way or another.
Oh, definitely. And they shattered the glass ceilings and showing, the new generation, me included, what everyone, that there's no limit.
Right.
If you set your heart to it, you're going to get it done.
Yep.
And, there was one story that I heard you told recently in an event about the B-29. Mm-hmm. Do you mind telling our audience that? That's an incredible story, Lisa.
Oh, it is. It is. One of the things that really set the WASP apart from the men is that, the men would have been trained in one primary airplane, and they would have flown that one airplane through the duration of the war. Occasionally, they might have been trained in a second airplane, but for the most part, that's what they did. They're one airplane, which is great. And the service they did was valiant. I never want to take away from what our men did. But the women had to be ready to fly everything. When they left or when they graduated from the program, they flew in all 77 aircraft. So from one day to the next, you could go from one type of pursuit plane to another, one type of bomber to another. And so they were just always ready. And they lived and died by the manual because they didn't have muscle memory to rely on. So they flew very carefully, and they did it just by the book. Well, when the B-29 was developed, it came to life in 18 months. Boeing put it together, and it was record time, right? The president was putting a lot of pressure. We need this kind of airplane. We've got to end this war. So Boeing came through, and they did. It had some issues in the beginning. They went back, they tweaked, they fixed. But there still was one issue of, it's a 4-engine plane, and the engines, if you didn't fly it by the book, an engine could catch on fire. It was not that unusual. And if it caught on fire, there was protocol that you had to follow to land safely. Well, Colonel Paul Tibbets was put in charge of this program, and it was a secret program, and he had to recruit the men to fly it. Put his squadron together so that they could go in and get the job done. And he was getting so much pushback from the men. They didn't want to fly it. They were very uncomfortable with how it could catch fire, and they were refusing. They called it a widowmaker. And which blew my mind because I didn't even know you could tell a colonel you weren't going to fly an airplane, but they did. So he was at his wit's end. He knew about the WASP, and so he walked into Eglin Air Force Base unannounced. He found a WASP who happened to be sitting in the nurses' waiting room, just reading a magazine, waiting for another friend who was up in the air flying. And he walks up to her with no preamble, and he says, "Do you know how to fly a 4-engine airplane?" And she said, "Oh, no, sir. None of us do. 2 engines is the most, but, I've got a friend that's flying right now, and she's done a little more advanced flying than the rest of us, but none of us can do 4 engines. So he said, "Well, when she gets down, you come visit me." So they did. And he asked them if they'd like to, train on the B-29. And they didn't hesitate. They said, "Yes, sir, absolutely." He, of course, left out all of the trouble that he'd been having. He just simply made an offer, and he trained them. And so on day 3, Dee Dee Dorman happens to be in the left seat, and one of the airplanes or one of the engines catches fire, and she just doesn't miss a beat. She instructs the technical engineer to extinguish the fire. She feathers the props. Everybody does what they're supposed to do, and she lands very calmly on the other 3 engines. And he looks at her and he says, "All right, you're ready, or y'all are ready." And they said, "Ready to do what, sir?" And he said, "Well, we're going to go train the men how to fly this." And so that's what they did. They went off to their first Air Force base, and the men were out on the flight line. They'd been told that a B-29 was coming in, that they were going to have some training. So this big bird, right, goes through the sky, makes a gorgeous landing. The men are impressed. They're going out there to shake hands with the pilot. and out the door steps two beautiful wasps. And you can imagine how the men were taken aback and they kind of stumble backwards a little bit. But the ladies, they spent time training them, and they did this at about 3 different bases before Paul Tibbetts' commanders sent him a telegram and said, we think your demonstration has gone on long enough. And sure enough, it had. There was no complaining, about flying it. And, it's just such a proud moment for the ladies because, they only flew stateside. They didn't fly combat, but what an assist, right?
Right.
Because the U.S., we would have won the war eventually, but it wouldn't have ended as fast without their involvement, specifically in the B-29 as well as in so many other endeavors. So it's a great moment.
Yeah, I think that story has always captured me in terms of, yes, the WASP were courageous, but they are excellent pilots.
Mm-hmm.
And their ability to stay calm, to manage, like you said, what the colonel taught them, which is overcome the engine design flaw by being calm and follow the instructions, right? And then what they turn around and teach the male pilots the same way of dealing with this risk. And that's what helped the male pilots realize, okay, it's safe to fly. We can manage this, right? And I love how it ends, 51 years later, a male pilot sends a letter to Dora, remember, and to thank her that, thank her for the training that Dora and Didi gave them and to help the male pilots overcome this fear.
Yeah.
I just love that story, that the confirmation or affirmation came 51 years later.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of connections like that were made, later at Oshkosh and different places when the WASP ran into the Tuskegee Airmen who, the WASP always defended the Tuskegee in social circles. And those Tuskegee came and found them at Oshkosh and said, oh my word, we were stationed with you at Mather Air Force Base. You stuck up for us. So there was all these connections that came later. It was just really beautiful.
It's just very empowering. Right? And not only just for women, but also you bring out the other, like the Tuskegee Airmen too. So yeah, the WASP have that magic.
They do.
Isn't it? You mentioned that in a few ways that they have inspired you in your personal life because the way you are, and we are all, the way we are, but, what other traits and qualities have you come to learn from the WASP that inspires you?
I like how they took care of themselves. They could have certainly complained and cried foul about so many things, but they never did that. Their goal was just to be kind and be the best pilot in the room, because it's hard to argue with you, right? If you are kind and you're good at your job. And that's how they set to win people over. We're just going to be really good pilots and we're going to serve well. And they did. They just rolled with the punches and they drew boundary lines where they needed to, but they towed their own line. They were just so self-reliant. They helped each other, but they didn't look for other groups to bail them out. And I like that. And maybe that's just my sense of independence. That's the way I was raised, right? But I like that about them.
Confident. They're confident. They do the job that they sign up to do.
Yep.
There's no entitlement.
No.
Yeah.
One of my favorite stories, just to show you kind of how they handled things is, after they'd proven that they could fly as well as the men, they were finally given uniforms. And of course, these uniforms involved pants. They flew in pants. And women really, a single woman wasn't always given a hotel room. Like your clerk had a right to ask, well, why are you traveling alone? Or where's your husband? You could be denied a hotel room for any kind of reason. And so these women would show up wearing pants and the clerks would say, well, what business are you in? And they'd say, well, we fly airplanes for the military. And they would be met just with complete disbelief. And they would say that that's a lie. Women don't fly for the military. You're making this up. And oftentimes they would deny them a room. And it got so bad one night they got a room, and the girls always shared because they only got a stipend. So they would all pile in a room and share it because they were really trying to, spread their money. And one night they'd gotten a room, they'd gone to dinner, they came back, they flipped on the light, and a sheriff was sitting on the bed and just saying, we don't need your kind in town. We don't know what you're really up to, but obviously you're liars and, loose women who wear pants, basically, So they had to pack up and leave. And so they said, what are we going to do? Like, we can't keep going on like this. Across, on these cross-country trips. And so this is the plan they devised. The next time they went to get a hotel room and the clerk says, who are you? What are you doing here? They said, oh, we're elevator operators. And the guy bought it. That made sense to him. Like, it's wartime. Women are doing a lot of men's jobs. I can see a woman being an elevator operator. Cool. Here's your room.
They're so clever.
They
so resourceful.
Go complaining. They didn't go to their commander and say, what are you going to do about this?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
They went, okay, let's just make up a plausible story and move on. Their egos weren't wrapped up in it.
Right. They roll with the punches and just kind of get the job done.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great.
Love that.
I do
too. Oh my goodness. What's the one thing you want people to walk away with during their visit at the museum?
I want them to walk away with a couple of things. I mean, first of all, that, dig down deep and find something you care about. You go set history for someone else. Or if there's something that you really want to do with your life, but you're afraid, work through those barriers, right? The WASP had to overcome, technological barriers, social barriers, and their own personal barriers, just like everyone else. Like, time has not changed that. We're still humans. And so walk away and go, what's stopping me from doing what I really want to do in this life? And work through those barriers and go fix it, and go do it. So I want them to walk away with that. And I also want them to walk away with a sense of pride in something that our country did. The threat of World War II was real, and our country banded together to save the world from tyranny. And what they did mattered. And we need to be brave and ready to step in if we ever need to do something like that again.
Yeah, it's definitely good values that for every generation to carry on that spirit, right? How do you think the WASP program impacted the role women play in military today?
It impacted it in that they didn't have, that the women today didn't have to prove that they could fly military aircraft. That had already been proven. That second generation that came in the 70s, they had to prove that they could coexist as official military members. And that was a whole other level, of controversy. But in terms of proving that women could fly just as well as men, that had been done. 35 years earlier, it had been done. And so that was one less thing that the women in the 70s had to prove.
They had an example.
They did. And then with the mentoring, when they would get together and, I haven't heard all the stories because really the WASPs were pretty private. And I know there's some big stories underneath there that they won't necessarily spill, but they get together with those other female pilots and they'll talk about how they handle discrimination or men who just wanted to run them down. And they'll talk about the difficulties of, flying cross country and not having a way to go to the bathroom, because those are real, and clothes that don't fit, because even in the military today, women are dealing with clothes that really don't fit too well. So, they had someone to mentor them through all of that.
Yeah, they needed it too.
Yeah, they really did.
The role model. It's the role model, they have been through that, all of it and more, actually.
Yeah, it's
so comforting. Yeah, it's comforting because every generation, when you go through, and I'm sure that that after one set of barriers have been worked through, there's another level of barriers.
Right.
You know, so having a role model that has gone through and shattered the glass ceilings to guide them along, to give them words of wisdom.
Yes.
Right. And that's encouragement.
That's great. Yeah.
You have fighter pilots on the board right now too, Lisa, right?
We do. We actually have an active duty pilot, which has been fun. And then we have several that are retired, and then one that is retired from the Air Force, but she still flies for United. So it's been fun to have their involvement.
You mentioned a little bit about the WASP uniform, the Santiago blue.
Yes.
Can you talk about that? I love that story.
Yeah, it's a great story. You know, when the program started, the women just had surplus men's flight suits in size 44 long. That was it. And so, you know, think about it. That fits a man who's about 6'3", 230 pounds. That's who it was made for. And so they have little women coming in. Some of them weren't so little, but most of them, you know, around that 5'3" to 5'5" range, you know, 100 and something pounds wet. And they're being given these suits. And so of course, they're making lemonade right out of those lemons, and they roll them up and they belt them in and they cinch them up and they do what they can to look neat and presentable. But yes, after they'd proven that their passing rate was as good as the men's, they were approved for an official uniform. And Jackie Cochran, their commander, was told, you know, go make something in the standard, you know, khaki Army color. So she, of course, legend says, you know, she said that her girls, which is what the WASPs were, her girls were not going to wear that ugly color. And so she went to Bergdorf Goodman and she said, I need 2 uniforms designed, one in the khaki or olive color, and then the other, I want to use this blue. I'm sure they had her choose from, you know, all their blue cloth, and it was the Santiago blue. And so they had them made. And then, of course, Jackie, she was so shrewd. It was these men that were going to be making the decision. And so she hired 2 models, a very average looking model, and she put that lady in that olive color. And then she got a really beautiful, you know, model, and she put her in the blue and sent them both down the runway. And, you know, it was a no-brainer for those guys. They picked the beautiful woman in the blue uniform. And to our knowledge, that was the first time that the armed forces used blue. So Jackie left her mark in the military world too.
Thanks to her.
Yeah.
It's now all Santiago blue.
Yes.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Love that story always.
Yes.
Fashion works, right?
It does. Well, yeah, it does. And they were so proud of those uniforms. It was really great.
Well, they look so beautiful and great.
Mm-hmm.
So now, what exciting initiatives are you working on the museum now?
So we've just finished up an expansion. We have 2 hangars on our property that we use as exhibit galleries. And one of them is a historic hangar. It was built in 1928, and it served as the first airport for the city of Sweetwater. And, you know, partly it was why Sweetwater was chosen as the location for the WASP, because it had a state-of-the-art field, Army Air Corps base. And then it had a working airport, which, you know, not every town did. And it had regular flights in and out. So when the museum started, the city let us buy it for $1. And that's where the museum started. And then we built a replica hangar on the same property and moved, you know, climate controlled. And so, you know, we made new exhibits and moved into that hangar. But this historic hangar is where our airplanes are. And we just finished fabricating all new exhibits for this historic hangar. And so it's just a lot of fun because it's very much in the look and the feel of the day. You know, it's the Army green with red, and it's got, you know, beautiful displays around the perimeter and then for the airplanes. And we have a replica bay, which is the head, you know, the living quarters for the WASP. And so you walk over there and a hologram starts talking to you. Hey, I didn't see you there. She tells you about what it's like to train and to live on Avenger Field. So it's been fun. We debuted it a couple of weeks ago. It's been beautiful. So that's good. And then we're going to continue with our expansion. We're going to be doing a lot of outdoor exhibits in our plaza and then eventually moving into the other hangar. So we have about 3 more years of expansion. And the reason we're doing this, we have the information. I mean, we have it all today. And if you come, you're going to learn everything you wanted to know about the WASP and more. But like I said at the beginning, we want this to be, friendly for the youngest generation, but we also want it to be the highest quality that we can offer these women. Because, I think about all the other World War II museums that focus on our men, and our men deserve to be honored like that. I never want to take away from that, but our women do too. And, I don't want their museum to be a hand-me-down. I want them to have a first-class jewel box museum. And so that's what we're working to create. And we're proud of what we have today, and we're going to elevate it. And, in 3 years' time, I think it's going to be right there with anybody else's museum.
That's why I love your team.
Yeah.
And it just, you have put in so much work and passion into preserving the WASP legacy. And then you're adding to it too and elevating it, like you said. I can't wait to come to see what you have done. It's been launched already, right?
It has been. It has been. So yes, I hope you will come. The only drawback is, at our homecoming event, that hangar, because it's also a working hangar. So that hangar is going to be kind of taken apart, because the planes will be out on the field. And so it won't look like a museum that day. I mean, the other hangar will, but the historic hangar, it gets used, for a lot of different activities over that weekend. So you'll have to come during a different time too.
Yeah, I'll stay longer. I'll stay for a week.
There we go. You have to stay with me.
I love that. I've heard about the NBC pilot.
Yes.
About Avenger Field. Can you talk about it?
Unfortunately, there's not a lot to say right now. I think that the actors strike and the writers strike.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I think it put a pretty big dent in it. And I think behind the scenes, there's probably a lot more going on than anyone knows or understands. But I think there's probably some regrouping going on. We want to see it happen so much. If you've seen the movie Hidden Figures,
oh yes,
I see that movie on a repeat. It's just one of my favorites. And I so much want to see something like that for the WASP. And I hope that it'll be out there soon. But right now, there's just not a lot to say.
That's right, because there is a writer's strike and now the actors too.
Right. The writers,
the writers is over. Right.
Yeah.
So hopefully soon we'll get some updates from you.
Yes. When there are updates to be told and had, I'd gladly bring that forward.
Yeah. Now, a fun question. We're channeling Dr. Brown, Back to the Future. We've got a time machine ready to send a 12-year-old girl back to the WASP days, and that would be you. What moment would you pick and why?
I would probably, which one would I pick? I know it would be during service, because that's where the action is. And 12-year-old me always wanted to be right where the action is. And so it may very well have been that moment when the Colonel Tibbets walked in and grabbed those 2 wasps. It could have been that moment. But I would want to see them in action, and just see how they responded to this constant changing environment. And, it would just be fun to, like, I think about Nell Bright, who's still with us, and she flew the B-25. And she just had a lot of adventurous, serious adventures and humorous adventures where they made mistakes. And, to be able to be in the cargo and just fly with her and watch what she does. She was one of the ones that stood up for the Tuskegee when they weren't allowed to eat in the officers' mess, even though they were officers. They were down with the enlisted men, and she stood up and said, this isn't right. They need to eat with the officers. And then when they were brought in to eat with the officers, all the wasps sat with the Tuskegee, angering the white men, as you can well imagine. And,
Mhm.
so just to follow Nell around and see what she did with her life, I think it would have been so fascinating. And she went on to be the first female stockbroker in Arizona, the first female to own her own brokerage firm, and one of the first two women on the New York Stock Exchange floor. So that was her whole life, just a first.
Love that. A woman who can stand up for herself and others,
Yes, right.
right?
Right. She knew
Mhm.
what was good and right. And so, yeah, if she would have let me follow her around like a puppy dog, I probably would have done that.
I could see that, Lisa, a
Yeah.
young Lisa running around
Yeah.
A Venturefield, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like your character in Flying Fillies.
Yes, little Dawn Springfield.
Yes.
I have some final thoughts.
Okay.
Now, for Vanilla, if
Mhm.
you can hang out with her, this cartoon character, what would you
Oh,
say to her?
oh goodness. Um, I would tell her to really mind those boys, that come in and mess up the airplanes and cause all that trouble. And I would say, now don't get caught up in all their fun. Remember, that you're here to protect the girls, and don't let those boys blow you off track with their shenanigans. You be the strong one.
I love it. Now, you have a great job. I mean, I really love museums. I have a person, that's my personal passion. So to work in a museum, it's fascinating to me. So if there are young people listening and they want to follow in your footsteps, what advice would you give them?
You need to be a lifelong learner. You need to understand that learning never stops. If you're going to work in a museum, it's an ever changing landscape, and you're going to have to keep up. It's not, you can't be like, I got my degree, I did my internship, and now I can rest, because it's it's a very dynamic environment, which maybe sounds funny because you're thinking about, well, you're representing history, that's static, right? You're representing something that's in the past, but the thing is, you're always promoting it to the future. And so you have to be a student of communication, of art, of hospitality, marketing, all those things. And so my big admonishment is, or encouragement, sorry, not the other, is, if you get your foot in the door at a museum, learn about all the different roles in that museum. And especially if you're in a small museum, because you cannot exist in a vacuum. There's no such thing as, well, this is my job and I don't do that over there, because it takes all of us. We're with a small staff, you are all in a life raft together, right? And you're either
Mhm.
going to make it to the other side together, or you're going to drown together. And so it's important to know how to do everyone's job and to be willing to step up and help. And it's very rich and rewarding. It's a lot, honestly, it's just fun when you have that camaraderie. But yeah, just learn, constantly learn.
That is just great advice, just to be a sponge
Yeah.
and know that every part is connected,
Hmm.
right? And one job impacts the next person's job.
Yeah.
So you're supporting each other
Yeah.
as an ecosystem.
Yeah, none of us have what I call like a clean job where, I have well-defined borders. I mean, we are just where one leaves off, one takes on, and
Mhm.
it's kind of
Yeah.
flowing back and forth. And it's hard sometimes to even define what one person does versus another, because we are just in it to win it all the time.
What's the favorite part of your job?
It's interacting with people in the museum and at the air
Mhm.
shows.
Mhm.
It's when I can get out there with people and just talk about the WASP and tell the stories and see the excitement in their eyes, and listen and receive, because so many times they have even better stories than mine. If they've been around the WASP for a long time, they end up delighting me with their stories. I like talking to those legacy pilots and learning about their experiences. And So yeah, there's a lot of parts of my job that are kind of nuts and bolts, and there's no, they're not glamorous. But when I'm out with the people, that's a lot of fun.
Did you know about the WASP before you work at the museum?
Yes, but not long before that, which
Mm.
was just a crying shame because I have a background in teaching and I taught World War II history. And, it was one of my favorite things to teach, not because it was war, but because of the way that the whole world came together or our country came together, right? So not just women going into factories. I mean, you had kids, you had young boys going off to win missions, but then everyone at home was growing, victory gardens, and you had 5-year-olds that had metal detectors, and they were trying to find extra aluminum for the war effort, and furniture factories were making war instruments, and people were doing without cars, right? Because there was a war. And I like camaraderie. And so I
Mhm.
tried to teach it as holistically as I knew how. And so I knew about a lot of the extra groups, the Merchant Marines and the Tuskegee and the Navajo Code Talkers, but nowhere in my realm of reading did the WASP come up. Not once. It's just shocking. So we moved to Sweetwater a year before I started in this job, and I saw this WASP museum and went, "What is that?" And I was just captivated and angry. I just thought, how do we not know about this? Because they served for 2 years. There was over 1,000 of them that flew. They flew 66 million miles in 2 years.
Incredible.
That was not
Hmm.
nothing, right? They
Hmm.
did every stateside job, every single one of them. And we can't put them in a history book? That just does not compute. And I know World War II history is vast. And, as a teacher, I already taught on it a good 4 weeks back in the day. They don't do that anymore. But back in the day, that's what I did. And so I know you can't contain all the elements of World War II, but to me, it seems like this one was important enough to get included.
That's why your job is so impactful
Yeah.
and so meaningful.
Yeah.
It's like it's meant to be for you to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I believe in synchronicity.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's been wonderful to be able to, to teach about it because, I'll
Mhm.
always be a teacher at heart. And that, when you ask me my favorite parts of the job, I mean, really it is that even if I'm talking or interacting, it's the teaching that I just
Mhm.
really enjoy.
And that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Now, if someone wants to donate to the museum, how do they go about it?
Oh, it's easy. The easiest way is to go to waspmuseum.org. And we have a donation page. I think you can just do waspmuseum.org/donation. But we do have a page. And, you can just give to the general fund.
Mhm.
But there's also specifics. Some people like to give specifically for the care of the aircraft or for education. And, we will do that. If you donate for something specific, like the people that donated for the T6, then that we put a fence around that money, and that's what we'll do with it. And you can call. We're always happy to do that, or go really old school
Sure.
and write a check.
PayPal, write a check in
We-
every form. But
yeah,
don't you love it if someone would say, "Hey, I'd like to give you money to buy a plane"?
yeah,
Sure.
yeah, yeah,
Love it.
yep.
So hopefully you get some groundswell supports.
I hope so. I
Yeah,
appreciate you bringing
yeah.
that up. It does
Love
take
it.
money, but yeah. So, and then, but I want everybody listening to think about putting Sweetwater on their route, right? If you're driving cross
Mhm.
country, we're off I-20 and we're a great place to stop and come in and spend a couple of hours, reading and interacting, and then, get back on your way. But it's worth seeing.
And you can grab some wonderful barbecue,
Oh
Texas
yeah,
barbecue along the way.
you can.
I
There's
was there. It
yeah,
was worth it,
yeah,
Lisa. I loved my museum visit with you. It's my first time there. And actually, I've been first time seeing you and as a speaker, but I have been at your museum, what, 3 times now? Every
yeah. I
time
think
I
so.
fly through Texas,
Hmm.
I made a point to go there and it just to feel the energy in the venture field
Yeah,
of the WASP spirit and the museum. It just it brings so much. It just inspires me.
Yeah.
Like you said, when you walk into that ground and you can feel the energy of these women, these spirited, courageous, and intelligent women, excellent pilots.
Yeah.
I can learn so much just from being in that hangar.
Yeah. We always say there's ghosts here. Their spirits are here. And we do have 13 WASP who have had their ashes spread on this field. So,
oh, yes.
Yep.
In the homecoming, there was one too.
There were 2 last year. Yeah, one on Friday and one on Saturday. And so that continues as well. It's been really, really amazing for sure.
That's why it's so special.
Well, can I tell one more story and brag on you a little bit?
Well, absolutely.
So one of my favorite tours, we have school tours coming through here all the time. And, we always start them off watching this it's like a life-size film, very dynamic. And it has original footage of the WASP in there and then modern things. It's just, we're really proud of that. So we always start the kids in there and I always ask them lots of questions about the WASP. And most of the time they know very, very little, if anything. And this group was just like, they were answering questions right and left. And I looked at the teacher, I said, wow, you've really prepared them well. And she said, oh yeah, I got a class set of the Flying Fillies and we just finished reading that. And of course, that book, Flying Fillies, is by our own Christy Hui. So it was just such a fun moment, because your book hadn't been out that long. And she just, the kids just enjoyed it so much. And, that's why historical fiction is such a great way to learn because, you get brought in softly because there's this great narrative wrapped around the facts. And then it makes you stop and think, okay, well, what are more facts? What can I do? So.
Well, that just brightens my day, Lisa.
Yeah, it's fun.
But I have to add to it that the background of that is that I reached out to you asking for supports. And when you said, yes, I will, I would provide you with the photos. And that transformed my decade-long manuscript on the shelf to a book on the shelf. So you had that power and you empowered me. Thank you, Lisa.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a fabulous book. And, I've got little grand boys and I can't wait. They need to get a couple years older, but we're going to be hanging out on the couch. In the next couple of years, we're going to read that book. And I always thought it'd be fun if you wrote it from a little boy's an adolescent boy's perspective, of what are all these women doing invading Sweetwater? That's an angle for your next book.
Yes. Book 2, book 3, hopefully.
Yeah.
But, thank you for sharing that last story, Lisa. I'm always grateful to you for your support.
Our pleasure.
Thank you for the stories. It's so empowering to talk to you, Lisa. Thank you.
I feel the same way about you. Thank you.
You take care, okay? Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye. That's all for this episode. Thanks for listening to the Adventures in the Sky podcast. To all of you dreamers and doers, believe in your dreams. For when you dream and do, the sky's the limit. Until our next story, unlock your extraordinary within and live inspired. To join the Flying Fillies Adventure Club, visit www.flyingfillies.com.